So, after the Viltrumite War is over, Alan the alien is made the new leader of Coalition of Planets, and he is given access to all the resources and weapons gathered by Theidus. The new variant of the Scourge virus was one of these weapons, and Theidus had left instructions to Alan to use this virus to affect and kill all the Viltrumites living on Earth. Alan was under high pressure from all the leaders in Coalition, and he decided to use this virus, even though it will also eliminate all the human population. When Nolan tried to stop him, he and Oliver fought Nolan and locked him in an intergalactic prison. They then went to Earth and were noticed by the GDA. Cecil soon informed Mark of their arrival, and Mark went to space to meet them. So Mark arrives and greets Oliver. Mark wonders where his parents are, and Alan tells him that they stayed at Taliskria. Alan reveals to Mark his plan to release the Scourge virus into Earth's atmosphere, much to Mark's anger. Alan and Oliver attempt to convince Mark to consider it, but Mark refuses. Mark tells the duo that the virus will also infect humans and asks Alan how it isn't any different than what Viltrumites did to his people. Alan argues that infecting them will stop the threat from happening again. Mark believes that this is the reason why Nolan didn't come along. Oliver tries to convince him, but Mark believes that he is right and says that Oliver can't help, citing that he is being cold to the human race. Alan says that they have to do this, and Mark punches him, believing that a part of Alan wants Mark to stop him. Oliver attempts to restrain Mark, but Mark pushes him off. Alan easily overpowers Mark and cites that even Nolan couldn't stop him, and asks Mark what chance does he has against him. But then Thragg catches Mark and tells the duo that he has him. Alan and Oliver are shocked by Thragg's appearance. He reveals to the duo that he knows about their plans to introduce the Scourge virus into the atmosphere and has set up technology to monitor Earth's orbit. He asks Alan why he shouldn't kill them both. Alan threatens to infect him with the virus by pulling on the dispenser, much to Thragg's anger. Alan reveals that the strain is stronger than before and will override any previous immunity. Thragg argues that he could kill Alan before the virus could take effect. Mark interrupts and asks that they give up since Thragg knows about their plan. A stressed Mark asks that they don't fight. Thragg says he understands that Alan is under pressure for being the leader of the Coalition of Planets. Thragg proposes a truce and explains that killing Alan will not accomplish anything, and says that he has his word that all Viltrumites are on Earth. Thragg also says that he knows Alan doesn't want to do it, and that since it isn't the only virus he might have. Alan initially refuses, but Thragg says that he is backed into a corner and has no choice. Alan agrees and Oliver attempts to fight him. Alan restrains him and the Guardians of the Globe arrive. Bulletproof is confused about why he can hear Mark and Rex can't. Mark tells him that he has a thought receiver and Rex is out of range. Bulletproof repeats what Mark said. Thragg wonders who they are, and Mark assures him that he'll handle it. Bulletproof tells Mark that Rex wants the four of them to come to the Pentagon, but he refuses. Rex uses his drone in an attempt to restrain Mark, and the Guardians start fighting them. Mark deflects a blow from Bulletproof. Meanwhile, Monster Girl attacks Thragg, whose attack has caused no damage to Thragg. Mark warns them to stay away from Thragg, and Thragg effortlessly tosses Monster Girl aside and Japandroid crashes into her, crushing her helmet. Rex's drone intervenes and gives her a new helmet. Kaboomerang throws a boomerang at Alan, and it has no effect while Knockout fights him. Oliver kicks Labrousier and heads for Alan's virus dispenser. He flies to Earth's orbit to release the virus himself. Mark holds Thragg back, asking him not to fight the Guardians. Thragg rebuffs, stating that his patience will only go so far. Mark sees Oliver heading towards Earth and rushes after him. He tackles him, and Oliver drops the dispenser. Oliver calls Mark an idiot, stating that he is trying to save the universe. Mark smacks him away and rushes towards the dispenser. Mark catches it and Oliver tackles him. Mark tells Oliver that he can't do it even if he doesn't care about humans. Oliver argues that how can Mark stop the human race from taking over the universe? Meanwhile, Alan asks the combatants to stop and heads to Earth, and Bulletproof stops to ask who Thragg is. Meanwhile, Oliver attempts to take the dispenser from Mark and accidentally fires into Mark's face. Oliver watches in horror and rushes to catch Mark. Alan catches up and tells him to stay back as the virus could infect Oliver too. He catches Mark and asks about his condition. Mark panics as he believes that the virus could have infected humans too. Alan reveals that the virus is spread through personal contact, relying on a carrier to spread it. Mark is relieved, and Alan asks that Mark be quarantined until he knows what to do. Alan looks at Mark and sees that the virus is already taking effect, much to Mark's confusion. Then on the dark side of the moon, in the Viltrumite warship, the Guardians of the Globe, a sad Samantha Eve Wilkins, Oliver, look in sorrow. Thragg talks to Cecil about Mark being in Viltrumite custody. So Thragg asks if Cecil is in charge of Earth. Cecil corrects him by saying that he is in charge of its protection. Thragg reveals that they have been on the moon for months, unbeknownst to Cecil. Thragg tells him that Cecil doesn't have a choice and that they weren't able to detect their ship because of their technological superiority. He also mentions that if Cecil attacks, he will kill them all, but Cecil just asks Thragg to do everything he can to help Mark. Meanwhile, in Dinosaurus's base, Alan and Dinosaurus battle, mistaking Alan for an enemy. Dinosaurus comments that he is evenly matched with Alan, and Alan corrects him by stating that he has been holding back. Dinosaurus apologizes after learning that Mark had sent him. Dinosaurus mentions that he has had no encounters with aliens from other planets and his appearance startled him. Alan also compares him to a Ragnar, much to his confusion, and the duo then head to the Viltrumite warship. On the ship, a crying and saddened Eve watches a sickly Mark, hoping for him to survive. The Viltrumite doctors tell her to leave as she will get in the way. Xandel sees her and goes to comfort her. Rex's drone looks at a saddened Amanda and he turns away, much to Amanda's sorrow. Dinosaurus and Alan arrive and Alan apologizes because he assumed that Dinosaurus could hold his breath in space, much to his confusion. The Guardians ready themselves for battle after seeing Dinosaurus, but Dinosaurus argues that their battle would bring down the warship and that his genius-level intellect can help Mark. Thragg tells him that he will not be needed, but Dinosaurus argues that his helping will gain him favor with Mark. Thragg tells a scientist to clear a lab for Dinosaurus and tells the rest of them to leave. Alan's presence angers Thragg and demands that they also leave. Thragg then goes to a conquered alien race scientist and asks him if he's found a cure. The scientist says no, but tells him that his body is fighting off the virus. He also reveals that Mark is a match, much to Thragg's surprise. Thragg becomes angry and tells him that he cannot tell this to anyone. The scientist says that he won't, but Thragg crushes his neck, causing his brain matter to gush around the room. Thragg drops his body and leaves. Dinosaurus continues to examine some tubes, and Thragg looks into the long-deceased skull of Lord Argall. Later, on the Viltrumite warship, Dinosaurus enters Thragg's quarters, much to his surprise. Firstly, he assures Thragg that he doesn't trust him. He also reveals that he had hacked the system and found his quarters that way. He asks Thragg for the scientist so he can compare notes with him, but Thragg tells him that he's unavailable. Meanwhile on Earth, after leaving the Pentagon, Alan and Oliver discuss where they will go. Oliver suggests Taylorscrea since he has no connection to Earth. Alan worries about Mark being in a Viltrumite warship, and he also reveals that since he failed the mission, he's in no hurry. Alan also worries that he was ready to kill all humans, just to kill few Viltrumites until Thragg stopped him. Meanwhile, Thragg finds Mark and tells him that he knows that his body is fighting off the Scourge virus. He also finds out his body is fighting off the virus because he is of the royal Viltrumite bloodline. Thragg reveals that Mark is the grandson of Lord Argall, Emperor of Viltrum, making Nolan his son. Thragg says and acted as Grand Regent for thousands of years and was tasked to find Argall's heir to place him on the throne, but now he refuses to yield his position to Mark and Nolan and will sacrifice him to keep people from finding out about his royal bloodline. He grabs Mark's throat and readies himself to kill him. He says that maybe Earth will believe that the coalition of planets was responsible for his death, but Dinosaurus sees him and attacks him. Thragg's invulnerable and tough skin causes his claws to break and Thragg to be uninjured, suffering only a tear in his costume. Thragg calls him a fool, and Dinosaurus reveals that he knows his planet's history, stating that this warship is the last warship for the Viltrum Empire. This angers Thragg. Dinosaurus then reveals that he set explosives in certain parts of the ship, and they could explode corresponding to his heart rate. A part of the ship explodes, and Dinosaurus demands to know why he's trying to kill Mark. Thragg says that he's asking too many questions. Thragg rushes to Dinosaurus and pummels him, causing more explosions on the ship. He tosses him aside to check on the explosion, but Dinosaurus jumps and bites him, but Thragg's high degree of invulnerability causes his teeth to shatter. Angered, Thragg stretches his mouth and causes 2 more explosions. Thragg leaves and says that Dinosaurus will hope that he will be dead when he comes back. When Thragg left, Dinosaurus picked up Mark's body and went to the escape pod and left the Viltrumite warship. Meanwhile, on Earth, Eve visits Cecil and learns that there's seismic activity by the side of the moon where the Viltrumite warship is. Eve tells him to send her up there, worried about something that's going on. Dinosaurus lands the escape pod into his secret base and loses consciousness. Mark wakes up and sees him injured, much to Mark's confusion. Thragg assesses the damage that his battle with Dinosaurus caused. He sees an upset Eve, but is unable to hear her since she doesn't have a thought receiver. Thragg takes her into the ship and tells her that Mark isn't there. She transmutates sharp swords from the air, thinking that Thragg did something to Mark. Thragg laughs at her and tells her to calm herself before she is impaled again and directs her to Dinosaurus. Meanwhile, Mark talks to David Anders about what has happened. David asks Mark if he's doing anything evil. Mark argues that Dinosaurus isn't evil and compares him to his brother. He states that he means to do good things, but lacks the human element, calling him pure intelligence. Mark attempts to bore David so that he transforms into Dinosaurus. However, it isn't working. Meanwhile, Oliver and Alan go to help Zack, who is fighting a symbiote organism. Alan punches the organism, and Eve uses a transmutation shield to contain him. Zack thanks Eve, and Eve asks for Oliver and Alan's help in finding Mark. Alan directs her and Oliver towards the location while taking the alien to Stronghold Penitentiary. David is relieved that Dinosaurus isn't coming out. Mark is frustrated, stating that the enemy could attack at any time. So, Dinosaurus finally transforms, revealing that his dinosaur form was healing up. Dinosaurus reveals to Mark that Thragg had attempted to kill him, much to Mark's confusion and dismay. Just then, Zandale rushes in at Dinosaurus and tells Mark to run away. Mark is confused, not knowing who Zandale is. Dinosaurus grabs Zandale and smashes him into part of the lab. Eve rushes to see Mark and the duo embrace. Mark goes to stop Dinosaurus and Zandale, but Oliver grabs him. Alan also goes toward him, and Dinosaurus mistakes them for Viltrumite agents. Mark attempts to explain that he's on his side, but the 4 of them keep fighting. In order to stop their fight, Mark punches Alan and screams in pain. The 4 of them look in shock, as Mark's arm is broken from the attack. Mark is transported to the Pentagon after he has broken his arm. Then 11 surgeries. They said that Mark's arm will now heal normally. Cecil reveals to Mark what he's been told about the Scourge virus and how he may lose his powers permanently. Mark still has his strength, but without his invulnerability, the sheer pressure caused his arm to break. Mark says that it will take him some getting used to. Eve assures him that it will come back, since Dinosaurus says it's likely it will. Then Mark and Eve arrive home. Eve assures Mark that he will get his powers back, but Mark begins to worry that he may lose his powers and might never be invincible again.